The Trump Internal Revenue Service just struck a blow against secular government, as well as, of course, money, any rules against money in politics. But I'll get to that point. But basically, they've allowed pastors and churches to endorse political candidates without losing their tax exempt status. Now, this comes from a lawsuit from two Texas churches that sued the IRS over the Johnson Amendment. It's a ban on religious and secular tax exempt nonprofits that promote political candidates. Now, in a court filing submitted on Monday, the IRS agreed to a carve out from the ban for churches and other tax exempt religious institutions. Now, the carve out only applies to them. The prohibitions remain in place for secular organizations, for the other nonprofits. Okay, because I mean, it's just to show you how biased it is in favor of these religious organizations, specifically Christian churches. Look, this is Christian nationalism in action, folks. Okay, the churches, they get the exception, but no one else does. And by the way, I doubt that this will apply to the synagogues and especially the mosques. I don't think that they'll be able to get away with this either. I couldn't imagine that, right? I think it's just going to be the Christian churches that are going to be allowed to play without paying. Okay. That said, they've been doing this in practice for a long time. The government has been extremely lax and wary about coming after the churches when they actually do violate the Johnson Amendment. I mean, even when the churches were trying to goad the IRS into coming after them, they still didn't. And I've got a couple of examples here. During the presidency of Barack Obama, hundreds of evangelical churches participated in something called Pulpit Freedom Sunday, where they had proudly and openly endorsed Republican candidates. And to kind of, hammer this whole thing home, they filmed it and then sent the sermons directly to the IRS saying, come on, come after me if you dare. So, yeah, they completely violated the Johnson Amendment. And the IRS was like, what are you going to do? They can't come after those guys. So they had every reason to revoke the church's tax-exempt status, but they never did. They never did. Well, okay, they did it once. Just before the 1992 elections, a group called Branch Ministries actually ran a full-page newspaper ad urging people not to vote for Bill Clinton. The IRS revoked the group's tax-exempt status. They sued, the IRS won. So that's the only time that the IRS actually did so. And of course, it was a victory for them. But all the other times, the IRS is like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This, despite the fact that the churches are openly endorsing candidates. Yes, some of them did endorse Democrats. You're looking at the HBCs, of course, but most of the churches went for the Republicans. In fact, in 2022, ProPublica looked into this, published a huge report, and they do a lot of great reporting, by the way. They found 18 churches over the previous 2 years, just over the past 2 years, from 2020 to 2022. They found 18 churches violating the Johnson Amendment. Yeah, and of course, that's just what they found. It's very likely that there were many, many more. From the report, the IRS has largely abdicated its enforcement responsibilities as churches have become more brazen. In fact, the number of apparent violations found by ProPublica and the Tribune and confirmed by 3 nonprofit tax law experts are greater than the total number of churches the federal agency has investigated for intervening in political campaigns over the past decade, according to records obtained by the news organizations. Now, the IRS was asked about that, and a spokesperson said that the agency, and you're going to love this response, the agency cannot comment on, neither confirm nor deny investigations in progress, completed in the past, nor contemplated. Asked about enforcement efforts over the past decade, the IRS pointed the news organizations to annual reports that do not contain any of that information that they had asked for. Well, that's pretty shady, isn't it? Yeah, I can't confirm or deny that these churches are violating the law. We don't have any information. Here's some, sources of information that actually don't contain anything that you were asking for. Have fun. Well, no. Now, as Andrew Seidel of Americans United for Separation of Church and State told reporters at the time, churches already don't tell the IRS how much money they're taking in or where it's going. Well, that's because they're tax exempt, right? That's part of what having that specific status and designation under the IRS gets them. By giving them enough leeway to endorse candidates, the IRS was essentially creating super PACs that are black holes. And so that's where it intersects with money in politics. And so that's another huge problem with this. And you wonder why we've been having a pretty big Christian nationalism problem. I mean, it's gone so far that it's right at the top now. And we are essentially a Christian nationalist government now. Disastrous. But don't worry, though. Jonathan L. Blacker, a Justice Department lawyer representing the IRS, argued that the churches could freely endorse the candidates without penalty because they weren't really violating the Johnson Amendment. No, that's not politicking. Churches endorsing a candidate openly, that's not politicking at all. No, instead, they argued that the endorsements from the pulpit were really more like a family discussion concerning the candidate. It's a family, everybody. A family discussion. Oh, okay. But look, again, yes, this effectively kills the Johnson Amendment, but only for the churches. Because it still exists. Donald Trump did not strike it down, even though he claims to have done so, but he didn't. It is on the books. And if it wasn't, the IRS wouldn't have had to make a carve-out for it. And they also wouldn't have argued that this does not run afoul of the Johnson Amendment as properly interpreted. It means there is a reason that they did it this way. So that the churches could, of course, get their exemption. While secular nonprofits, well, they're still, bound by this. They're not able to endorse candidates and keep their tax-exempt status. So this allows Christian conservative houses of worship to endorse candidates during their sermons without having to pay taxes. In a way, they're now able to advocate for representation without being subject to taxation. Now, I remember no taxation without representation, but it's now the other way. They get representation without having to pay taxation. They're not, the rule was supposed to be, okay, if you want to play in politics, then you got to pay. And if you, don't want to pay the taxes, that's fine. Just don't get involved in politics. But the churches are like, no, we want both. We want our cake and we want to eat it too. We want to be involved in politics and endorse Republicans and not have to pay taxes. And they just got it. They're able to do that. And look, it goes further than that, though. Because think about the tithes. I mean, think about that money. How much of that money is going to be set aside to fund those politicians that they're endorsing? And think about that. Think about that. I mean, think about how the fact that, yes, the conservative Supreme Court has basically designated money as political speech. Now these churches have more of a freedom to speak up and endorse specific candidates. So, I mean, what's to prevent them from taking money and just handing it to the politicians and saying, hey, this is our speech rights. Nothing. Nothing. And so, and not only that, but also, since there's still technically limits on individual donations in politics, right? So billionaires, if they want to give a large sum of money, yes, they can give it to a super PAC. Or now they can give it to a church, which can funnel it through the church to that politician, and they can call it my free speech rights. And there it is. And again, these churches can do this, operate this way, tax-free. They're essentially being subsidized by the American taxpayer. That's it. I mean, yes, we're subsidizing Republican politics and religion now. They've merged the churches with the Republican Party. This is the most official way of doing that. According to American Humanist Association Executive Director Fish Stark, who released a statement, quote, "This is another dark day for our democracy. The Johnson Amendment, though weakened over the years by lax enforcement, is the small but mighty dam standing in the way of a torrent of dark money influencing our elections," or just buying it right off. Now that the Trump administration has opened the door to pastors and houses of worship explicitly backing candidates for office, all bets are off. There will be little to stop billionaires from funneling money through the churches to buy our elections, and they will get a tax write-off for doing it, all subsidized by American taxpayers. Weakening the Johnson Amendment to consolidate political power has long been a priority for Christian nationalists. And now they have the megaphone they've been waiting for decades. Americans United for Separation of Church and State and state president and CEO Rachel Laser issued this following statement, quote, "The Trump administration's radical reinterpretation of the Johnson Amendment is a brazen attack on church and state separation that threatens our democracy by favoring houses of worship over other nonprofits and inserting them into partisan politics. It's President Trump and his Christian nationalist allies' signature move, exploiting religion to boost their own political power. For more than 70 years, the Johnson Amendment has reflected the will of the American people, the majority of whom want to protect the integrity of our elections and shield our houses of worship from the corrupting influences of partisan politicking. And the IRS's proposal to exempt houses of worship and religious organizations from the law, but still enforce it for secular nonprofits, would grant special favor to religion, an unconstitutional violation of church-state separation. We urge the court to reject the administration's latest gambit to rewrite the law through the judicial system." Look, this is clearly unconstitutional, but I'm afraid that at the end of the day, that is not going to matter at all. Again, if this goes through the court system, and that's what these statements are referring to, right? Where's it going to end up? Supreme Court. Oh, yes. The Supreme Court that is massively controlled by the right wing. They control the courts. And this court has ruled their way on every single religious freedom issue that has come across their desk. I have very few hopes in being able to stop this. I'm not saying that we shouldn't fight against it. Of course we should. Just have to figure out how. And right now, the only thing that I know how to do is to try to inform people, to let people know exactly what this administration is doing. And that, yes, this is Project 2025. This is the Christian nationalist playbook. And this is what they're doing. And this is what they're doing to try to break down the wall separating church and state. If you are uncomfortable with that, if you're uncomfortable with becoming a Christian theocracy, then you ought to get real pissed about this. And should be ready to defend our institutions, defend our Constitution against these incredibly illegal rulings and carve-outs. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.